Hey everyone, John here again, taking on part two of our series on motivation. Today we're going to talk about setting goals. So, yesterday we spoke about the beginning parts of motivation and the differences that I feel between willpower versus why power, and really trying to dig in and find out our why and possibly even ultimately our purpose, why we feel we're here in the first place and what we want to achieve out of our lives in general. So, digging into that why and this motivation, we need to know what we're working towards. We need to find out what our main goals are. And we can have a handful of small goals along with some big goals, but I want you to kind of take a moment now and think about what your big goals are. And I want you to think really big. Not just, I want to run a mile. Think more, I want to run the Boston Marathon. Not just anyone. I want to go to Boston. I want to qualify and make it even further. I want you to think big. Maybe it's not, I want to buy a house. Maybe you want to buy a mansion. Maybe you don't feel like you want one. Maybe you want a quiet little cabin in the woods. But find out what that goal is. What really lights your fire, that passion inside you that drives you, or hopefully will drive you towards it. So think for a moment. Where are we, right? What kind of goals do you want? Again, don't be afraid to think big. And again, these should almost be scary. Some of these bigger goals aren't going to be easy, and that mountain ahead of you may seem intimidating. It may be frightful. So take a moment and think about them. Next, we want to talk about what's going to make these goals helpful to, or I guess a good goal. And you may have heard people talk about the SMART goal setting. So we can kind of talk about that as well. It's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. I like to start with relevance because you can make a goal, run a marathon. That's meaningless for me. I mean, I have fitness goals and other things, but I have no desire to run a marathon. So setting that as a goal, I'm not going to have any motivation to work towards that. So make sure that the goals you're picking are relevant to what you want to do. That's going to help begin to find that motivation of where we want to start with. Second, you want to make sure your goals are specific. So again, we're going a little out of order. Now we're back at the top. You want your goal to be specific for two reasons. First, later we're going to talk about visualizations and using it as a strategy for achieving your goals. And if your goal isn't very specific and it's vague, it's going to be hard to visualize those details that we're after. So make sure when you're writing this down, be specific. Like I said, run a marathon. Maybe you want to run a specific marathon, or you want to run with certain people. Whatever it takes, add in all those details as specific as you can. The other portion to being specific is, let's see, what do I want to cover? Right, ties into our next step, which is measurability. You want to make sure that you have enough details in it so that when we're trying to measure that goal, we know when we actually achieve it. If you said I wanted to climb a mountain, how big a mountain? Which mountain? Do I have to touch the top? Do I need to just hike up the mountain? Do I want to climb the face of a mountain? Those details will help, and that measurability will help us know that we've actually reached that goal. Because maybe someone says, oh, I want to climb a mountain, and I just walked up the hill, and I could say, see, that's tall enough for me. So we want to have that measurability tied into it, and again, the details of being specific. The next two are kind of tied together, that attainability and time boundness. And first, if a goal is literally impossible to achieve, maybe because it's happened in the past, you can't go back in time as far as we're aware. So make sure it's attainable. And this is a little tricky one for me because I kind of believe that if you have the desire and you're willing to put in the effort required, that given enough time, you can achieve just about anything. And that's what ties into our time boundness. You want to make sure that your goal that you set, you have a specific schedule or a time frame in mind as to when you want to achieve it by. The reason is that if you don't set a time limit to yourself, I can almost guarantee you will never reach that goal. If you don't have some calendar date, even if it's just a year, it doesn't have to be a specific period of time down to the second, but you have to have something that you know you're working towards. And that's going to come into play because once we have that timeline, we're going to go backwards. We're going to break down the steps and have little milestones along the way so that we know if we're on track for our goals, if it's reasonable to our attainment of that goal. So we need to have that time boundness. And the other reason why we'll later break it into pieces is you've maybe heard of the 80-20 rule, and it applies to a lot of different things. And in this case, it'll say that 80% of the work required to attain that goal is going to happen in the last 20% of time that you give yourself. So if you don't put a time frame on it, you'll never get to the end where you start that, oh, I procrastinated too long, I better get started or I'll never get there. If you don't have a time at the end, sadly, you'll probably never even get very much past the start line. So make sure we have that time frame in place, and we'll talk about that later and go from there. Now that you have some goals down, the next part is to write them down. You can write them down in a diary if you have one, or a vision board. And if you don't know what a vision board is, it could be a poster board, a wall in your house, a whiteboard. I have a whiteboard. And that's where you're going to write down your goals. You want to put it someplace where you're going to see it every day. You can even, I've done this in the past, write it on a Post-it note, stick it to your bathroom mirror. Every morning you get up, you see it in the mirror staring back at you. It's that daily occurrence of visualizing and seeing that goal that's going to help make sure that you stay focused on that, because if you chose your goal correctly, it's something you truly want. So write that after you get through the steps to make your goals, write them down. And then finally, take a look again at your why. See if your why is still aligned with your goals. And if it's not, that's okay. Maybe you need to adjust your goals because you feel your why is very important. Or maybe you got to look into your why again and break down from that goal to drill down again, as we talked about yesterday, into how to find out what's really driving you towards that goal. Once we get those two meshed, we'll come up with a plan and you're all set. So at this point, you have a very strong foundation and you're lining yourself up for success. So thanks again for watching. If you enjoy these videos, be sure to subscribe down below. I try to post these often to help everyone. And if you have an idea or something else you'd like to hear about, let me know and I'll see what I can do to help you out. Have a great day.